Okay, good morning, everyone. I show we're after 9:30. We'll call the meeting to order. Will you begin with roll call?
Yes, sir. We'll start with Chair Andrus.
Present.
John Byram.
Here.
Thank you. Kurt Campbell. Will Conley. Debbie Farmer.
Here.
Thank you. Charlie Flatten.
Here.
Thank you. Steve Graham.
Here.
Thank you. Vic Hildebrand. Thomas Youngman.
Present.
Thank you. Russell Davis.
Here.
Thank you. Glenn Lord.
Here.
Thank you. Scooter Mangold.
Here.
Thank you. Dan Meyer.
This is Alan Merklin with Plum Creek. I'll be sitting in for Daniel Meyer today.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank
Gary
you.
Middleton. Travis Krusky.
Here.
Thank you. Robert Puente.
Here.
Thank you. Vanessa Hugh Williams. Humberto Ramos.
Here.
Thank you. Weldon Riggs.
Blaine Short sitting in for Weldon.
Thank you, Blaine. Roland Ruiz.
Here.
Thank you. Diane Savage. Darren Simmons. Mitchell Sowards.
Here.
Thank you. Jonathan Stinson.
Happy Thursday.
Thank you. You too. Heather Sumter.
It's Daryl Graham. Heather's no longer with us.
All right. Thank you, Terrell. I will make that change. Tom Taggart.
Here.
Thank you. Ian Taylor.
Here.
Thank you. Nathan Glavey for Diane Wassenich.
Diane Wasenick is here.
All right. Thank you, Diane. Adam Yablonsky.
Here.
Thank you. And our non-voting members, Marty Kelly.
Here.
Thank you. Rusty Ray. Ron Fiesler.
Here.
Thank you. Ileana Delgado. Don McGee. Elizabeth McCoy. Thank you. Charles Wiedenfeld. Jamie McCool.
Here.
Thank you. Carl Kroll. Okay, Chair, we do have a quorum, but before we get started, I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce Kai Castillo next to me. She is a new member of the San Antonio River Authority, and moving forward, she will be your administrator for Regional L. So she will be sending you the emails, agenda packets, and invitations. I'll be around through the February meeting, and then it's all Kai. So she will send her information to y'all so you have that moving forward.
Could you please spell her first name for me?
Yes, ma'am. Diane, it's C-A-Y-E.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, back to you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome aboard. We look forward to your assistance in the coming months. Let me just confirm, this is a hybrid meeting, so we're recording the meeting. So
Yes, sir.
everyone's notified it's being recorded. We'll move forward to agenda item 2, public comment. Is there anyone present in the room or attending virtually that would like to make public comment at this moment? There appears to be none. We'll move to agenda item 3, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Those minutes were sent out to the members prior to the meeting. Hope you've had a chance to review those. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
I had a couple comments on the meeting. This is Terrell Graham. On the minutes rather, not on the meeting. It has me setting in for Heather at the last meeting, and I wasn't setting in for Heather. And then there appears to be 2 Mr. Grahams, and so the minutes should distinguish which Mr. Graham is making motions and so on. I always suggested it's T Graham or S Graham or, however we want to do it, but there should be some distinction. It shouldn't just say Mr. Graham.
That's a good point, Mr. Graham. Kenny, would we have the ability to make that distinction, given your notes or recording?
Just item 5, or that should be secret. You just put a cap, big G for the small G.
You'd be able to identify and make that correction.
Yes, sir.
Would the membership find it acceptable is there a motion to adopt the draft minutes with that revision? I think that distinction.
Steve Graham makes that motion.
Come on. We have a motion, is there a second? Second. We have a motion second, is there any opposition to the motion? If not, we'll consider the motion passed. Thank you. Before we move any further, I would actually like to move one item of business up. That has to do with the filling of vacancies. That's item number 6. We have received a nomination for a vacancy. Created by Mr. Chavez resigning from the planning group. Mr. Yoxall has been nominated. I believe all the members have had a chance or have received his nomination package. Mr. Yoxall is present here at the meeting. As some of you know, in past years at any rate, there's been a process through which the executive committee would meet, conduct interviews, for lack of a better word, and then based on those interviews of multiple applicants for the same position, the executive committee would make a recommendation to the entire group for consideration for filling vacancies. Obviously, that decision for any single position is left to the planning group as a whole. Given the fact that we have one nominee for one position, we didn't think it was appropriate use of everyone's time to try to conduct such an interview, especially given the qualifications of the applicant, or the nominee, excuse me. So with that said, I'd like to give Mr. Yoxall a chance to introduce himself, make any comments he would like, and then we can consider his nomination. Group find that acceptable? Any opposition to that approach? Okay, Mr. Yoxall, would you stand and
Thanks,
give
Tim.
us a brief introduction?
My name is Dan Yoxall. I've been on the job as President and CEO of San Antonio Manufacturers Association for less than 90 days. I was recommended to this position by my predecessor, Ray Chavez, who I worked closely with as he retired and a transition. I'm very grateful to him and Mr. Patrick Garcia, who's on the screen there from Division Laundry, who's board chair-elect of the SAMA Board of Directors. When I interviewed for the position, both Ray and Patrick said this is an important body to become involved with for SAMA, to represent our manufacturing members. So it's been a priority for me to see if I could engage with this group. I encouraged it, I spoke with Tim, and we put together the application. I very much appreciate this group and what you do.
Is there any discussion by the membership? And if not, is there a motion to fill the vacancy with Mr. Yoxall? Have a motion, is there a second? Mr. Pruski, second motion. Is there any opposition to the passage of the motion? Hearing none, we'll consider the motion passed. Mr. Yoxall, please join the membership here at the table, pick a seat. We appreciate you being willing to, of course, work with us and serve on the board. Okay. Let's move to agenda item 4, status report, communication about TWD.
All right, good morning. Can you hear me? Is that on? Next slide, please. So my name is Elizabeth McCoy. I'm with the Texas Water Development Board, and I do have a few updates for you this morning. The contract amendments that we've been working on for a little while now that incorporate the total study cost and the full scope of work for this cycle have been sent out to the political subdivision, so we are working on executing those documents right now. The first Interregional Planning Council meeting for this cycle is going to be next week on November the 9th. It is going to be in person in Austin, but there's also a virtual component for attendance. And we have some more information on that meeting available at the link on the slide. And then we've developed some new educational materials that are linked on the slide as well. We have one for water supply and flood mitigation strategies. It's a one-pager kind of educational document. We've updated the planning group member guide, which provides the overview of planning group member roles and responsibilities and an overview of the planning process. And then the administrative guidance document for the planning group sponsors have been updated for this cycle as well. And that's a kind of best practices guide for the planning group sponsors. Next slide, please. All right, so since the last meeting, the irrigation and mining demand projections have been released. We're still on track to have the population and municipal demand projections released in February. And we've also specified deadlines for the population and demand revision requests. So the non-municipal demand projection revision requests are going to be due on July 14th of next year. And the revision requests for the population and municipal demands are due about a month later on August the 11th. So we have a pretty tight timeline between now and then for the planning groups to complete their review of all that data and submit any revision requests to the board. Next slide. So as I mentioned, all of the non-municipal demand projections have been released, and that data is available online in some interactive dashboards. There's also spreadsheets of the data available linked underneath the dashboards, and all of the methodology documents are also available online. Because of that tight timeline, we're encouraging planning groups to discuss how they plan to meet the upcoming deadlines and consider submitting your non-municipal demand revision requests prior to when those municipal demands are released, if you have them ready, just to kind of go ahead and get those off your plate and we can start taking a look at them. And then, next slide, please. So, reminder that the planning group will need to go ahead and take action to approve submitting a revision request if you're gonna be requesting revisions. And we'd encourage you to coordinate with us as early as possible on those. The guidance for revisions is outlined in Exhibit C, Section 2.2. And TWGB staff are available to assist you and provide presentations. Katie, who's the manager of our projections team, she did a presentation, I think in February of this year on non-municipal demand. So if you're interested in another presentation, please let me know and I can try and coordinate with Katie on that. And then we also want to note that planning grant funds may not be used for revisions to TWDB board adopted projections. So kind of in July and August, you'll be submitting your revision request. Then the board goes through this process of coordinating with other agencies and preparing materials that will then be presented to our board to adopt those projections. So any revisions that would occur after our board adopted those projections, you can't use planning grant funds to make those revisions. So just a heads up on that, you'll want to make sure you get all your revisions in by those deadlines. Next slide. So we've released updated contract scope of work, which is Exhibit A, and then the contract guidance document, which is Exhibit C of the contract. Those were both updated to include all of the tasks for the 6th planning cycle, and we have them available on the 6th cycle planning webpage. So I have a few slides now to kind of go over some of the big changes for the 2026 regional water plans. Most of these are related to implementing legislation and stakeholder feedback that we received from the Interregional Planning Council and changes from recent rulemakings. So we'll start with task 3, which is, which is water availability and existing supplies. The technical memorandum and the regional water plan are going to need to include the methodology that you use for calculating anticipated sedimentation rate. This is something that planning groups are already doing, but we're just including that documentation in the plans for improved transparency. We're also asking that reuse be presented in a separate subsection in Chapter 3. And again, many planning groups are already doing this. This cycle, we've created a hydrologic variance checklist that you'll need to submit when you're requesting any surface water hydrologic variance requests. And this was intended to streamline the review process and kind of reduce the back and forth that we've had to do with consultants in the past. It's also going to help us summarize that information in the state water plan. Next slide. So task 4B is identification of infeasible strategies in the 2021 regional water plans. So this is a new requirement that comes from statute from Senate Bill 1511 from the 85th legislative session. So this task is going to involve looking back at your 2021 regional water plan and identifying if any strategies or projects are now infeasible. And we've included detailed guidance on this in Exhibit C. Some of the key points are that this analysis is going to need to be completed before the technical memorandum, which is due in March of 2024, because you'll need to include a list of any infeasible strategies or projects in your technical memorandum submittal. You'll also be required to present the results of this analysis at a public meeting, the public meeting where you'll also be presenting your methodology for how you're going to be identifying potentially feasible strategies. And then if the planning group identifies any infeasible strategies or projects, you'll be required to amend your 2021 regional water plan to either remove the strategy or project or revise it to push that strategy or project out to a later decade if that would make it feasible. And then potentially incorporate new strategies or projects. And there is a deadline associated with adopting an amendment for this task, and that's June of 2024. Next slide. All right, so you'll be reviewing strategies and projects from your previous plan and coordinating with project sponsors to determine the implementation status and determine feasibility. At a minimum, this review of the status of strategies and projects will be for strategies and projects within online decade of 2020 in your last plan. And you may remember that those were required to be online and providing water by January 5th of 2023. And then additional near-term strategies and projects that may have a lengthy permitting or construction process should also be reviewed for infeasibility. Statute lists that some affirmative steps that may be taken by the sponsor that would make the project feasible, and that includes spending money on the strategy or project, voting to spend money on the strategy or project, and applying for a federal or state permit. And we'll be sending out data to highlight projects to look at, and we can provide more guidance as we kind of get closer to moving into that task. Next slide. Task 4C is the technical memorandum. New requirements are to include a summary of interregional coordination efforts to date, and that list of infeasible strategies or projects from Task 4B. Task 5B is evaluation and recommendation of strategies and projects. We've added guidance to address House Bill 807 requirements related to the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Assessment and GPCD goals. These were required in the last plan, so you've kind of gone through this process before, but the requirement came in late in the cycle, so it wasn't included in guidance, so now it's been updated to include that guidance in Exhibit C. Conservation strategies are going to be restructured this cycle to split conservation strategies into two types: water loss mitigation strategies and then water use reduction strategies. And this is to help us be able to better report out water loss data. And then there's a new subsection to document the implementation status of certain strategy types, and we do intend to provide a table template for you guys to use for this task. Next slide. Task 7 is drought response information. We've added guidance to address the House Bill 807 requirement on unnecessary or counterproductive drought response measures. This cycle, the rules were amended so that planning groups can identify rather than recommend drought response triggers and actions, so that change has been updated. There's new guidance to optionally address droughts worse than the drought of record, and there's a new subsection required to address how planning groups may be addressing uncertainty and a drought worse than the drought of record, if that's applicable. It also includes identifying kind of what measures may not be included in the plan but could be available during a drought worse than the drought of record. And we're just trying to kind of have that clearly documented in the plan so we can report out what the planning groups are doing. And it's intended to be a pretty high level exercise. Next slide. Task 9 is implementation. We've reduced the content of the implementation survey this cycle, and we've also added guidance to address the House Bill 807 requirement on achieving economies of scale. For Task 10, which is plan adoption and deliverables, the draft and final plans will need to include documentation of the planning groups and regional coordination efforts. And this cycle, the state database reports can be included in the draft and final plans via a link, a hyperlink to our database reporting application, instead of including those tables in the hard copy of the plan. You could still include hard copies if you'd like to in an appendix, but the links are going to allow the public access to the most recent data. Next slide. All right, so we'll end the last slide with a few more important reminders. The requirements to complete the infrastructure financing survey and the project prioritization have been removed. That was to implement House Bill 1905. And then due to the removal of the infrastructure financing required chapter, the 2026 regional water plans are going to have 10 chapters. So on the 6th cycle planning webpage, which is linked here at the bottom of the slide, you can find copies of the amended scope of work that includes all the tasks, the updated Exhibit C guidance document, as well as a document that we've prepared that outlines the major changes to Exhibit C. So that's really handy to kind of focus in on what the big updates have been. So that kind of wraps things up. I know it was a lot of information, so I'm happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Going way back in your presentation, I have a question. As you mentioned, we previously received presentation on the methodology for developing certain projections. And you made an offer to have such a presentation made for population. I know we have a subgroup that's intending to meet, what I'm calling committee subgroup, to address that. Does the membership wish to receive such a presentation on the methodology?
Yes.
Okay. I would too. Okay, so would you coordinate with Sarah and try to get that presentation to us, if possible, at the next meeting?
Yeah, sure.
I have a question about the task 4B on infeasible projects. I'm sorry, I don't fully understand how we determine feasible and infeasible. Is that something that will be dealt with and addressed at a future meeting, where we'll go through that technical criteria?
Yeah, so this is a task, so just like you're going through projections now, you guys can, kind of arrange at a meeting to go through task 4B. And there's, the process for how you do that is still pretty well up to the planning groups for you to determine your methodology, but there's guidance on, like I mentioned, that if a sponsor has taken affirmative action, then that could be considered, the project could be considered feasible. And that includes, has the sponsor spent money, voted to spend money, or applied for a permit, I believe. But the planning group could consider additional kind of criteria as well if they wanted.
It just seems rather subjective. Make that definition made by what we think.
Yeah, it seems like there is some flexibility there. This is the first cycle we've done that, so as kind of questions come up when planning groups start looking at that, we can provide additional guidance.
Following up on that a little bit, is it for, and I apologize, I haven't looked at this in the bill, is it for recommended strategies or all strategies?
So it is at a minimum, your 2020 recommended strategies, and then strategies or projects that may have that long lead time for construction.
But not necessarily the ones that are just an alternate.
Right, I don't think it includes alternate.
Okay.
We don't have any alternates in the previous one.
Yeah. Even better.
You had mentioned a discussion around a drought worse than the drought of record. Can you talk just at a very high level about what that content is about, how that severity is determined, and how the group would consider that type of situation?
So, kind of the regional water plans are based on the drought of record, which is the worst recorded historical drought. There has been kind of interest from stakeholders in considering drought conditions that may be worse than the drought of record. So planning groups can kind of consider that if they have data that they could use to incorporate that into the plans. Planning groups can also, and they have in past plans, to deal with some of the uncertainties in like projections or water supply analysis. They use like a management supply factor where you can recommend strategies above your needs to kind of deal with that uncertainty and things like that. So it's kind of a discussion for the planning group to have, I think.
Great, thank you.
In regards to task 4B, again, going back to the task 4B, I believe you stated at a minimum, projects will be online by 2020 and 2021 regional water plan. So this strategy is required to be online and turn water by January 5th, 2023. I guess I have a question possibly for a consultant. Do we have a list of strategies that we're supposed to be looking at water by January 5th, 2023? So we start identifying what the strategies are so we have some idea. At a minimum, I think we need to consider those. And it's concerning to me again, we have a lot of strategies that potentially are going to come thereafter. So just to get an idea of how many strategies there are.
I can put together that list from the previous plan, which strategies are supposed to be implemented by that date.
Because it talks about the sponsoring entity, and there's a process here.
Yeah, and then I can also follow up and figure out the different status of them, because I know for sure the ARWA GDRA Phase 1 project is on there, but that one is already, I believe, still projected by water before this date, so that is an instance where we would not need to amend. But I'll put together a list and I can present it at the meeting.
Yeah, because we have strategies that we're looking for funding possibly next year or the year thereafter, going through the process. I think that was qualified, but there's other strategies out there that may need to be, I don't want to say feasible, but need to be looked at. Sponsored entity needs to be declared whether we cannot do it.
Right.
So it's just concerning that it's task.
And I think we do plan to kind of pull that information together from the 2021 plans and send that to you guys to kind of help with that. And I will note that in the kind of the TWDB comments on the draft plans from last cycle, we included a comment for each region saying, hey, these are your kind of big 2020 online projects that you have listed. Just a reminder that they'll need to be providing water by this January 2023 date. And then we asked for those big projects for you guys to check in with the sponsors, I think, and maybe provide justification like, oh yeah, this is what the implementation status currently is. So hopefully those 2020 projects will be kind of on track for providing water. I'm just throwing out there that you have taken a look at this with your draft plan before.
Just related to, I guess, some of the near-term plans, regardless if they're on time in construction, they're still being constructed, so feasibility, I think, is a moot point. Kind of further down the rabbit hole on the projection demands, specifically the non-municipal, we had discussed in our work group, manufacturing, obviously with the 130 corridor, Hayes, Caldwell, it was with Samsung's of the world and then the news about Micron looking at this. Our manufacturing projection demands are woefully low in those counties, and then also the increased interest that we're seeing in some of the economic development projects affiliated with some of these large high-tech defense industries in the lower basin has us looking at Victoria, Calhoun, Mercurio demands as well, which we may need to look at. And so I guess to clarify, do you want us working obviously with Lauren, but is there someone at the water board that we need to be paired up with? Because, and the clarification I'm asking is, in your comments you said that y'all would like those obviously as soon as possible, but prior to the release of the municipal projections that are going to be out in February?
So some planning groups are kind of on track to go ahead and adopt those before, like in February. It's absolutely fine if that is not the case for Region L. But yes, if you have data that you think supports, increasing those manufacturing demands, you can send that to myself or Katie Dahlberg is the manager of the projections team, and Lauren may want to coordinate through her. So we'll leave that to you guys. But
part of the concern I had, because some of the data may be considered speculative by some, and I know that we went over the metrics in the subcommittee of what would be needed to share with the sister agencies to kind of QAQC these and adopt it. But if it weren't adopted, and then we can't spend money on water management strategies that may be paired up to meet with those demands, do we have to hide under the drought, under worse than a drought of record, to build in some demand and some strategies to get this. I feel like we're kind of on two different paths. One is acceptable and one may be questionable.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess let's see what data you have to support a demand revision request and kind of how that would fit in for the demands. And then if for some reason it's not able to be accommodated in that demand number, then potentially you could consider, recommending something above meeting whatever that need would be that the demand's reflected, if that may not make sense.
We'll work with Katie and Lauren. Yes,
Yes, and in the presentation that I'm giving in just a minute, we have now identified dates and times for the breakout sessions for the population water demands work group. And the manufacturing meeting, I believe, will be on November 30th. So, we can discuss those issues then.
Yeah, tangentially, that we have no data or estimates on the manufacturing impacts to the municipal, which obviously there is a connection there. All right, sorry.
Good points. Thank you.
Elizabeth, I'm sorry, Tom Taggart, Mr. Chair, has a question online.
Mr. Taggart?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if there was any guidance this cycle in relation to the practice of taking any population increases in cities from county other, and that being a zero-sum approach. Has there been any additional guidance on that in this cycle?
So we do have guidance on how the population that we receive from the state's demographic agency will be kind of just, I think we take their county level projections and then we distribute them out to the lugs. That is, I think, detailed in Exhibit C, let's see what section, I think section 2.2. But I don't know what your specific question is, can I ask you, I guess. Could you repeat it, or?
Yes, I think in past cycles, if there were increases to population estimates in cities and municipalities, many times those would be only granted if it came out of then the county other total. So the total for the county basically is a zero-sum change.
I think that is still the case for this cycle.
Mr. Graham, online, a question, a comment?
Yes, sir. I had a question, and this may have already been covered, Tim, but I was reviewing the data and stuff, and I see steam power electric, but I don't see anything for like solar panels and other uses for electric generation. And if that's been covered before and this is not a new topic, then we can just move on. If it isn't, it's probably something that we should discuss.
I'm sorry, clarify for me, you're not.
Like, for instance, we have 5 solar farms planned here for Goliad County currently. And in doing some research, like looking at the Mechanical Engineering magazine from the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, they estimate that 10 billion gallons of water currently in the United States is being used to wash solar panels. As they get dust on them, their efficiency drops 30–40% with dust on them. And so depending on the rain and environment, different areas and stuff requires different amounts of water. This summer would have been a terrifically bad time here in Goliad County for keeping dust off of solar panels. I know over in Runge, in Karnes County, there's a solar farm built already operational. And in B County, there's a solar farm already built operational. I've looked at estimates or tried to find good estimates, and I really can't find real good estimates. I see something like 20 gallons per megawatt hour used to wash panels and so on and so forth. And although this, in the grand scheme of things, this may not be a big, huge use of water, but I see it as shifting what is currently a surface water use to a groundwater use. Most of the steam generating plants operate on cooling ponds and use surface water. Very few. There's Christine, Southwest Texas nuclear project. I mean, not nuclear project, South Texas Electric Co-op uses groundwater, but that's the only plant in South Texas that I know that doesn't use surface water. And so it's a shifting of use that I guess is my bigger concern from surface to groundwater with these solar panels coming online.
And so are you curious to know if that use is factored into the estimations of the steam electric demand?
Yes. Or if it should just be electric generating projections and not steam electric.
Gotcha. So the steam electric power generation demands they include water for facilities that require water for production, and I don't think that includes solar or wind or anything that's dry cooled generation.
I don't know that wind necessarily uses any water. I don't know if they wash them or what, but solar panels definitely are washed unless they have some kind of, the article I was reading in ME magazine was on research to use static electricity and stuff to take the dust off panels, but I don't think we're there yet.
Do you think you could go back to Belmer?
Yeah.
And confirm whether or not there was any consideration of incidental water uses for solar panel power?
And if it's not, it's a consequential.
Right, exactly. If you can gather some information on that, that would be useful.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Does that address that?
Yes, sir.
So I was messaging with Alicia Smiley from Long Beach just now, and she looked at the backup data in the manufacturing demands, and there was only one instance where solar panels were included as a, I guess, I'm assuming it's a solar panel manufacturing company in Region C, but there's no other indication about solar panels or some solar panel operations or washing or so forth included in the manufacturing demands.
I understand. Well, Mr. Graham's point, perhaps we could investigate, try to learn a little more about the sort of volumes we're talking about, and whether or not that's anticipated to be a significant volume, if we make any sort of estimation, and report back at future meeting.
Like I say, nationwide, Tim, the American Society, or the author for the magazine, not necessarily the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, is saying 10 billion gallons currently nationwide. And how that factors into Texas, I don't have any idea, but I think they said 10 billion gallons was enough for, yearly water for 2 million people.
Very fine. Point made. We'll gather some information and we'll report back at the future meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Are there any other comments or questions regarding PWDB's report? Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
We'll move to agenda item 5, status reports and communications from Regional Water Planning Group members, including liaisons to other planning groups, representatives from groundwater management areas, etc. Is there anyone present in the room or online that would like to make any comments under this agenda item?
I will, Tim. Ron Fiesler, representing Region K. We're pretty much on track with your timeline. It's amazing to see how it's almost like, what was it, Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again. So it's really interesting to see how this year we're pretty well tracking. One thing I wanted to ask is that we've had to replace vacancies on our committee twice now, fairly quickly, one after the other. And in both cases, it amounted to a replacement of a county rep. We found it's taken anywhere from 3 to 6 months to replace somebody because of scheduling, meeting schedules, holidays, posting requirements, things like that. And it's a little frustrating it can take that long, because that means that somebody's not on the committee. And I see y'all just have replaced somebody, and we're looking at our bylaws to see if there's any way we can streamline it. Even a week or two or a month would help. And so, have y'all had any issues that it might be useful to us that you've corrected or found ways to make it a faster process?
Well, the one example that I can refer to where we've had a problem that I think we've minimized or made less of a problem is we had the same sort of notice and delay issues having to come back before the entire planning group to get authorization and seek nominations. We've streamlined that process. It's a standing task and authorization for San Antonio River Authority to seek nominations for any vacancies that develop. That seems to have addressed the timing and sequence issue. It has done nothing to address the interest, the lack of interest in some planning groups to participate. But yeah, I can't recall whether or not we amended bylaws or what we had to do to make that streamlining. It looks as though we did. I would suggest you talk to Kendall.
I will, no, that's good.
Share some information on this issue.
In some cases, like for counties or for river authority stuff, you have a very limited audience or candidate pool for that particular interest category. So
yes,
we would like to figure out a way, maybe we can just take the alternate and work through a simpler process, but we're not sure how that will file or how that will fall legally within our posting requirements and that sort of thing. So we're starting to explore that. If we find any wonderful solutions, we'll share that.
yes, please pass them along, especially increasing interest. We'd love to get thoughts on that.
Thanks, Tim.
Yes, sir. Well, just I'll make at least one comment here. I encourage others to do so. We have, as you know, some of you serve as this, but others know that we have designated liaisons from the planning group membership to serve as liaisons to adjacent regional water planning groups, and I believe it will ultimately be part of our demonstration that we've had this interregional communication between planning groups that our liaisons actually attend at least and participate in the neighboring planning groups meetings. So those of you that are serving as liaisons, I'd recommend that you, one, do so, and two, notify our support staff that you've attended those meetings if you have. I've attended the most recent Region P meeting. They, much like Ron reported, are in a similar position and considering similar items to those that we're considering here at Region L. Nothing significant to report on that front. And then with regard to groundwater management areas, groundwater management area 15, I think I previously reported has adopted a DFC. They've now received the so-called MAG reports, and districts will be undertaking in the next year revisions to their management plan to address those changes. There are some changes, but the DFCs and the new MAG values. I believe those MAG reports have been delivered to the regional planning group for our use in our process. I suspect that's the case for the other groundwater management areas that intersect our planning group. And finally, of course, I'll attend the interregional planning group meeting scheduled for the 9th. And Jonathan will attend too. So, and we'll have staff. Do you intend to participate in that interregional meeting? No.
Yes.
You do? So we'll be, with the addition of the other two, we'll be well represented at that interregional planning group meeting. Are there any other comments from, or questions, et cetera, from any of the other members?
Tim, this is Diane Wasenick. I'm the Region K representative, and I've attended all the meetings since I was appointed that liaison member. And I asked Ron Fiesler to report today on Region K because I was traveling and missed their recent meeting, and I knew that Ron would be there. Thank you.
Thank you. no other comments, we'll move from agenda item 5 and move to agenda item 7. Presentation from technical consultant regarding release draft data from TWPG. Are we ready?
Working on it. Okay. Well, hi. Good morning. I'm Lauren Gonzalez. In the interest of transparency, we have put together a list of the current water-related projects that the Black Wings team is engaged with, and I've passed them out to all of the planning group members that are here today. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. Starting off with our first agenda item for the technical consultant, we'll give a schedule and progress update. So,
Here goes the mic on.
Is this better? Can you hear me better? Okay, great. Okay, so this is the schedule for the entire planning cycle, so all 5 years. And on the left-hand side, we have the different tasks that we're engaged with. We have the Texas Water Development Board data releases on the 3rd row, shown in the little green flags. And as you can see, in 2021, there was not a lot going on. In 2022, there's a little bit more going on, just 4 different tasks essentially, or 4 different bars. And then in 2023, we'll be moving into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or so different tasks. So things are really going to pick up, as Elizabeth mentioned, in 2023. So we're getting our ducks in a row to get things pushed along and moved along as quickly as we can with the non-municipal water demand projections data in anticipation of that shorter timeline for the population and municipal water demands review. So far, we've received data from the Texas Water Development Board for the water user group list. And also, we've received historical water user group data and draft baseline GPCD data. The deadline for responding to the Texas Water Development Board with any feedback, as Elizabeth mentioned, is going to be August 11th of 2023. So we've got some time, but again, because we're getting population data, it would be helpful if we can make any revisions or request or provide feedback to the Texas Water Development Board sooner rather than later when it comes to the historical water user group data and GPCD data. We've also received the water demand projections now for all the non-municipal categories. So we've received livestock and manufacturing earlier in the year, and then and also steam electric, and then we just recently received irrigation and mining in August. And so we'll be giving a presentation of the irrigation and mining water demand projections today. So again, looking ahead at 2023, there's a lot going on. And so we have a few different deadlines, as Elizabeth mentioned. We have a deadline to submit feedback on the livestock manufacturing and steam electric projections by Q3 of July of 2023. And then we have for Task 2B, the population and municipal water demand projections. We have a deadline shown in August for that one. And then we've also got ongoing anticipated scope tasks that include Chapter 3, which is the water availability and supply analysis. And we'll move into Chapter 4, which is the identification of water needs, and that includes the analysis of which water management strategies are feasible to implement by that January 5th, 2023 deadline. And then Task 5, which is development of water management strategy evaluations, that will also begin to start getting kicked off probably towards the end of 2023. Perhaps it'll slide to early 2024, depending on scope items and so forth. And then Task 7, the drought response information recommendations, that would also begin probably sometime at the end of 2023. Along with meeting stream segments, and policy recommendations. And of course, we've got plans to implement task 10, the public participation and plan adoption tasks. And I believe Kendall will be talking later about the planned dates for 2023 regional water planning group meetings in February, May, August, and November. Are there any questions about the schedule so far? Sorry.
I've got a question, Lauren. With
Yes,
regards to again what we were told on task 4 today with new requirements, and there's a date of March 4th. There's the analysis done, and there's also adopted amendments by June 4th. Does your schedule capture that? If not, just insert it, I guess.
So those were dates in 2024, correct? So this schedule does not capture it because this is just for 2023.
Okay, then going back to the previous schedule, that you had 2 slides before that, is it captured on this? And if not, can you just capture it?
Yeah. It is not captured here,
Okay.
but updates to the schedule will capture this. Because we haven't gotten a contract yet for those scope items. So once we,
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
I'll just throw out there if that's okay. That analysis will be due with the tech memo, so I think Lauren might have that as a red flag or something.
the tech memo due March 4th, 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the overall schedule or the schedule for 2023?
So we have a meeting, tentatively, scheduled for February, early part of February. We simultaneously expect the release of population demand projections February, perhaps after our meeting. But we should receive the presentation on the methodology. You think that's reasonable? We'll be able to get that meeting?
Yes, if you guys have a date, I can check in with Katie today.
Oh, quick, thanks for the quick response. That's not what I was asked for, but to the extent, it sounds as though we have a fair amount of work ahead of us on that matter, given the concerns about manufacturing needs and how they make time together. And I understand the work group will probably undertake most of that work, develop it and bring it forward, but doesn't look like we have much time on the schedule for membership to have to be re-educated at each meeting, so we're going to have to focus on that, encourage everyone to things they're going to want to be involved in that matter significantly to engage.
Right. So I'm not exactly sure when the population municipal demand projections are going to be released. It's going to be in February sometime, but our planning group meeting is going to be in early February. February, what, 3rd?
Yep.
3rd? February 3rd. And so Texas Water Development Board has been doing a really good job of getting data released on time and if not early this cycle. So I don't want to put them on the spot and say, they'll probably have it sooner, but it's possible. But the fact of the matter is that the staff work group meeting is going to be 2 weeks before that in January. And so the likelihood of having the population and municipal demand projections by mid-January is relatively low. So I think a lot of the work we'll be doing to review the data, and consider it, and provide feedback is going to be after that February meeting. But we can at least do the methodology discussion because that will have already been established.
Right. I guess I'm trying to point out we'll have one meeting at least scheduled at this point in May. And we've got a subcommittee working on the matter. We have to afford them time to do the work. Of course, you know this, I'm speaking generally. And then for them to bring back the information they assemble, any recommendations, et cetera. If they can get that done by May, fantastic. But if they can't, then we're looking at, unless we schedule a special meeting, the meeting at which it's presented would have to take action as well. So, my recollection is many times things are delivered and there's to the main planning group and there's time for the members that give it a lot of consideration before action is taken. And that may not be the case on this matter, and it's of high importance. So
Right.
If anything, I'm concerned that schedule is accurate. Might be deceptive to some that aren't familiar with the process.
Right.
Okay.
And then,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Taggart has some questions.
Mr. Taggart.
Yes, I had a question in relation to tasks 3, 4, 5, and 7 insofar as they relate to any potential consideration of you know, drought conditions as far as what standard is applied. Obviously, trying to determine water availability and water needs. I mean, none of those things are going to be independent of the decision on whether we're looking at drought or record as it's been historically defined, or whether the group chooses to do something else. I guess looking at this schedule, I'm not clear on how that evaluation in advance of doing these tasks would work into the schedule. Kind of in line with what Tim's looking at with the number of meetings we have scheduled versus when some of this work will actually start, like the water availability and supply analysis.
I have an idea or thoughts on that I'd like to throw out to you all, planning group members. I think that it may be helpful to have that discussion with regards to developing a new subcommittee or work group to delve in, because that was something that we had talked about last year, about developing a group that would look at the water availability modeling really closely and understand what hydrologic variances would be considered, and then also having the environmental work group, and then potentially having another meeting specifically about supplies or something like that. So that could be something that could be addressed and solved through developing and establishing a new work group.
Good comments. Mr. Graham, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of water availability, it's a pretty fundamental question, drought record or future condition. I mean, before we spend a ton of time in the subcommittee developing methodologies, I guess I'd want a concurrence from this group that there's a fundamental desire to change the method. We used up to date. I'm not taking a position either way, but I'd rather not spend a ton of time looking at future conditions if there's no appetite to leave the drought record methodology.
For the purposes of determining what future needs there are. I think if I understood the presentation or comments made earlier, there's opportunity for the planning group to consider other drought scenarios, but not necessarily use it for the determination of needs. So
yes.
Okay. This is something. Are there any other comments regarding how the planning group wishes to proceed with considering, if at all, using or addressing droughts other than the drought of record for regional?
Yeah, I feel like we don't even have to have a crystal ball to look into the future. That we have evidence from 2011 to 2014 that the intensity of a drought can be worse than the drought of record. And even at this moment, we're in a drought that is in intensity worse, even though we don't know how long it's going to last. I believe there's enough evidence to consider using something other than the drought of record.
I think that one thing we may want to ask, the state is what information they may have that they could bring forth as far as any modeling or any work they're currently doing in relation to this. I'm sure there's multiple efforts underway at a state level, and I know agencies like EAA and others are running computer models and evaluating this further. And I think understanding and maybe having our consultant reach out to see, what information we could bring to bear, without getting into some full-fledged scientific study that, may help give us some kind of feeling as to how to approach that, I think. I do support. Obviously, I think facts indicate we need to take a look at that and be comfortable with the basis we plan to. It's so foundational. I think we have to address that as far as making a decision on it very clearly.
Just building upon Tom's comments, last legislative session, there was an effort and there was some funding for additional WAM updates for some basins. I know the Guadalupe Basin is a priority for this session. So from my perspective, I would like to wait until we get an updated WAM from TCEQ, since they're the regulator of my water rights that y'all get to buy from me. And then EAA and GBRA separately, I know, are undergoing some climate change modeling. And that I think for the next cycle, we may be able to bring more data specifically to this region that may put some pins on some modeling efforts, because of all the rabbit holes, this could, be one of the most time-consuming and cost-consumptive, in which the Water Board has not granted additional funds for these efforts for the regional water planning process. We want to look at some different yield scenarios and safety factors. That's a conversation that can be entertained, but from my perspective, we're not interested in that at this time.
Well, and sure, that's good to know that because I'd like to at least address that. We say we're going to address it in the next cycle because of these conditions. I mean, I'd rather not be silent on the issue, rather say we've got a plan of action, but it may not involve this cycle, a future cycle. Explain why.
And I know the Water Board and others have efforts, and there's other consultants doing different Monte Carlo scenarios on different droughts and et cetera. But I think the WAM, if TCEQ is really going to update the WAM and bring our data set from, I think, ends at like 86 through the 2011 drought and others, 2014, et cetera, could give us at least a real world application of what that looked like for us, so we can have that perspective before we continue forward.
But of course, we've been waiting 8 or 10 years for that update, so it may not happen. But also the Water Development Board does have a climatologist, correct? Isn't that part of his job, is looking at projections for the state?
Yeah, that's separate. That's separate.
Oh, it is, okay. But that would be the kind of the source of, I mean, it seems like that could be a standard source of information for all regions within Texas.
So we did receive a comment in our sunset review, and TWTP is starting to coordinate with the state climatologist as of August. So I don't really have any information to share with you.
Kind of building upon that too, the Water Board is going through sunset, and will have their sunset bill. I don't think the draft is out yet, but it is soon of the bill. And this issue was a topic that the Sunset Commission did vote to have added to their bill. So I know legislation will speak to these issues during this planning cycle. And I'm not athletic, but seems like a good punt to at least wait till May to see what that legislation may opine or direct us in a different direction.
I asked a question earlier about a drought, more severe than a drought record, because I, from time to time, as you might imagine, present on our MBU's water supply publicly, and I'm standing in New Braunfels showing, what our water supply would look like for the drought record, while just a few miles from me we have grass growing in spring runs, right? And so it's kind of this ironic situation. And just like the gentleman to my left pointed out, this happened in 2011 and 2015 as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that I agree with the discussion. I think that it's important the region says something about it, but I also think that there's work that should be done that is in process right now already that we would recommend following that through and see where that ends and including that in future updates. But I do think that is something that long term this group needs to take up. And I believe it is happening. I don't think that there's urgency behind putting this in a plan that we're working on right now, but because of what's in process.
Tim, if I can.
Just
elaborate.
a moment.
I think, I agree with a lot of the commentary that's been shared. I think that from my experience in the past sitting at this table, when this regional planning group takes on certain issues, it's easy for it to get misinterpreted. My concern with strain from the drought of record is that the risk that we codify something in a plan that takes on more meaning than it needs to take on prematurely, when the state hasn't got their arms around a drought other than the drought of record. So I think for planning purposes, I understand that that's certainly necessary for different user groups to plan accordingly and be prepared. But for codifying something in a plan, I'm a little reluctant to go there just now. When we're still kind of in the throes of experiencing the present drought, and we're not sure exactly what this impacts ultimately will be. So I think getting some distance from that and really evaluating all the tools and updating the tools, I would say.
I think Rowan has a very good point about us saying, if you go within that lane that's been created already. In my ever-ending efforts to keep Rowan happy, SAWS has, for example, in our planning, we've changed from the drought of record. We have the drought of record, but we also have the intensity of the 2011-2015 drought, which was shorter, but much hotter, deeper, less rain. And so and not just now, but in 2017, in our water management plan of 2017, we did it. We're updating it 5 years later this year, and it's we're moving that forward. So for a lesser entity or a smaller entity of OEGNL, if we choose to do that, then we answer to our city council, we answer to the public. But Regional as a whole, and as a big group, I agree with Roland that we should stay within that.
Stay in course.
Yeah.
Robert. Okay. My first inclination is just kick this down the road. Plenty of work with. But I appreciate all the comments too, and I think they're all on the mark. I don't think we can ignore the topic altogether, but perhaps in light of what may develop in the next coming months with the legislative session, perhaps now is not the time to undertake considerations of changing our methodology from using the drought of record for planning purposes to some other drought scenario. What I would propose we do through whatever chapter, whatever task, etc., that perhaps we can speak to this topic in our plan. That we recognize that there's some need to give drought and changes to drought, etc., some discussion and consideration for future plans, perhaps improvement of the plan. So at the moment, I'm not inclined really to establish a subcommittee to work on this matter. Is there any strong opposition to that approach moving forward?
I do have a comment, if I might.
Tom, just a moment. I recognize you have a comment. We've got one here in the audience. So
yeah. So if our decision is that we don't have enough data today, we're waiting on other stuff, right? Just to at least acknowledge that if we're kicking it down the road, acknowledge we're kicking it down the road.
There you go. Yeah, and that's what I'm proposing. But I hope we do a little better than just to say, what, we're kicking it down the road, but perhaps we can finesse that, but waiting for a more opportune time, given the various circumstances and information needed to address that matter. But I think we can incorporate that into our plan, and if not directly into the plan, something analogous to the work we undertook to improve. Previously, you may not be aware of this, we had a process in which we identified certain topics and areas that needed improvement in the planning process. And this would be one of those that we tackle under that sort of approach.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Tom.
Yeah, just a couple comments. I think there's some wisdom in waiting and seeing what the legislature does, given that we'll probably have a good look at that, within only relatively small number of months. I do think that your suggestion of putting it in the plan in some fashion, I think this is something that at the very least we need to cover in Chapter 8, as a policy matter, that if it's something we're going to wait on or we're waiting, further information or modeling, that could be addressed in the policy section as to, future work that we, have planned that we know we don't necessarily have, all the pieces of to make good decisions on yet.
Excellent, I agree. Okay, is there any additional discussion regarding drought matters?
Chairman, this is Diane Wasenick.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to not argue that we need to, change our drought of record, but to just mention to people who are concerned about this issue that the Edwards Aquifer Authority is undertaking some climate change modeling, and the Habitat Conservation Plan, because it's in its rollover stage to do an additional few decades of the plan, are building upon what EAA is doing and doing additional modeling. And they're looking at intensity of drought, temperature, many factors that can be modeled from existing models, but done more specifically for our area. And there's a meeting of the science team coming up next week that's going to hear a presentation on this, the science team for the Habitat Conservation Plan. And there will be additional models presented over the coming year or two. And I encourage all of you to follow what's going on there, because it is the very region that many of us represent. And it will end up giving us much more information. That's all.
Thank you, Diane. Any other comments regarding that subtopic? If not, Lauren, do you want to proceed with your presentation?
Certainly. So in terms of ongoing efforts that we're engaged with, you as a WUG may have received a survey from us requesting updated contact information. And we will continue to follow up with new WUGs and follow up on the various emails that have bounced back because contact information has changed. And we may be asking for some of your help individually to help us track down certain WUGs and information if we just can't find some of the rural folks' contact information. So. We also have planned population and water demand work group meetings to discuss draft projections in more detail for non-municipal demands. And hot off the press, we have dates and times now. So the livestock and steam electric meetings are going to be on December 8th. The livestock December 8th at 1 p.m. and steam electric December 8th at 2:30 p.m. And these are going to be at the San Antonio River Authority. We will have more information about all of that once it gets finalized. For the manufacturing meeting will be November 30th at 2 p.m. And the irrigation meeting will be December 13th at 10 a.m. And we can send all of these dates out to people. But our plan is to, we've already presented the demands for livestock, manufacturing, and steam electric. And today we're going to be presenting on irrigation and mining. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail on irrigation and mining today, because we're planning to do our deeper dives at these upcoming staff work group meetings. So, not staff work group meetings, population water demand work group meetings. So if you have an interest in any of these, please send me an email or Kendall an email so we can make sure that you're included on email lists and updated about all of this. Another important thing to note, these are going to be hybrid meetings. So if you cannot attend in person, not a big deal. Are there any questions about that? If not, Then, additional ongoing efforts are water user groups needing to review the historical data. And so this is just a reminder. This is a QR code for the draft water demand projections dashboard from the Texas Water Development Board. Take a look if you have any questions about it. And again, our due date to get it back to the to get feedback back to the Texas Water Development Board is July 14th, 2023. But internally, we're hoping to really resolve a lot of the non-municipal demand projection feedback before the population water demands, before the population municipal demands come out, so that we're not juggling multiple very complex and heavy topics. And for water user groups that are interested in looking at their historical data, this is a QR code with information that would take you to Texas Water Development Board's website. And you can see historical water use data, historical GPCD data, and so forth. Are there any questions about that? All right. And that completes item 7A. Maybe we'll move on to 7B. So irrigation and mining demands projections and the supporting data. So I'm going to ask Jamie Burke to provide the presentation for the irrigation and mining. She couldn't be with us today, so she's going to be doing it virtually. So please bear with us as we work through any potential technological challenges. Jamie, are you?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect, yes.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm apologize that I couldn't attend in person, so hopefully this will go well anyway. Before I get started talking about the irrigation and mining demands, we had a question, I think a couple of meetings ago, about livestock water use rates. I think the question was specifically about chickens and whether their water use rate included cleaning of the facilities or if it was just for drinking. And so we did reach out to the Water Development Board. I wanted to give you all an answer on that, and the answer is that the estimated water use for all of the livestock demands includes drinking, cooling, and cleaning of the animals and their facilities. It does not include any of the processing of the animals. That part is included under manufacturing. So I hope that answers that question for you all. And so, okay, so let's start off with the draft irrigation water demand projections. This information here is from the Texas Water Development Board's dashboard. You can see it's providing that red line is the 2021 plan projections. The green line is the draft 2026 plan projections. And I should say that these are the Region L totals. Just to clarify that. And then over on the left side of the screen, you've got in the black line, you've got the historical data. And so the 2021 plan projections, those used as a baseline a 5-year average of 2010 through 2014 water use, whereas the draft 2026 plan projections use a baseline average of 2015 to 2019. So you can see based on that historical data there why the green line is lower than the red line. In addition, the Water Development Board's methodology, similar to the 2021 plan, is to hold the demands constant over the planning horizon. There is an exception to that in counties where the available groundwater volumes are less than the groundwater portion of the demand projections. Those counties' demands will decrease parallel to the decrease in the groundwater availability. And those are based on MAGs that have been reviewed and updated by July 2022 by the TWDB groundwater staff, and those have been incorporated into the demand projections. From looking at the TWDB supporting data, It looks like most of the MAGs for Region L have already been updated as of July 2022, so that those have been incorporated into the Region L demand projections. We are still waiting on updates for Comal County, Hayes County, and Kendall County. Historically, for those particular counties, their groundwater availabilities have stayed constant across the decades. So we may not need to worry about any of our demand projections being, I guess, revised slightly as those MAGs get approved in the coming year. Are there any questions about that? Okay, so then we can go to the next slide. So again, we're focusing on the Region L totals, but we wanted to go back and provide you a little bit of additional historical water use data. So this graph shows the Region L irrigation water use from 2000 to 2019. And you can see it, there's a little bit of a downward trend to the data. We have included that orange line is the 2010 through 2014 average. So that's the 2021 plan projections. And then in the green is the 2015 through 2019 average. So those are the draft, that's the draft 2026 projection. In between, we're showing what the 10, if you look at just a 10-year average, what does that look like? That's that black line. And so as we get into the population and water demand work group meeting for irrigation, if the planning group feels like the draft projections for this cycle are perhaps not the best representation for Region L of what a dry year irrigation demand should be, we can look at several different scenarios of what might be a better representation of that demand projection. And so these are a few, you know, this information should help us consider what types of scenarios we might want to look at. So just wanted to get you started thinking about, where's the, are we interested in like a high number? Are we interested in more of an average? What are we thinking? So just wanted to give you a little bit of information to start thinking about that before we get to our work group meeting. Okay. See, so that we've talked about kind of on a region-wide level, we wanted to give you some information also on the county level. And so we've got the next two slides are graphs showing a comparison of the irrigation demands in 2030 from the 2021 plan, which is the darker blue, to the draft 2026 projections, which is the lighter blue. And so you can kind of look at the different counties and see some counties, they're really pretty close from last cycle to this cycle. Other counties, there's a fairly large difference. So this is Atascosa through Gonzales County. And then the next slide is Guadalupe through Zavala County. Okay, and then we also wanted to provide you the actual numbers. So now we've got them in numerical form. And so we've also got them broken out into two slides with the region total at the bottom. And then finally, we know that last cycle there were quite a bit of unmet irrigation water needs in the 2021 plan. So we wanted to provide you that information as well. So you can kind of see where those higher unmet needs were this may be something that we want to take into consideration as we're determining whether we want to make any revisions to the draft irrigation projections for this cycle.
Mr. Youngman has a question.
Yes.
The amount of water used, where do you actually get these numbers from? Every irrigator has a meter on their well or their pump?
That's a good question. And I saw a presentation that Katie Dahlberg gave where she explained a little bit about where that those water use estimates came from. So I can try to give you that information. They're developed by the TWDB Water Science and Conservation Group, the Ag Conservation subgroup of that department. They use crop data collected from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Farm Service Agency and local sources when available. And they use surface water irrigation diversion releases that are provided by the TCEQ Water Masters. And then for groundwater, they have the groundwater conservation districts assist by reviewing the estimates and suggesting revisions based on local expertise. Thanks for your question.
I've got a question with regards to looking at these demands. The meeting's on December 13th. Is that meeting composed of Mr. Yovansky and others, or is that?
Yes, sir. So I reached out to Mr. Yablonsky and Mr. Byram, and I spoke with Mr. Christie this morning about this. As you all may remember, there's the Regional Water Planning Group established a work group called the, I believe, Rural Community Outreach Work Group. And there has been some question about the overlap of the duties and so forth between the Population and Water Demands Work Group and the Rural Community Outreach Work Group. And so I spoke with Adam and Mr. Byram and Mr. This, and the proposal for the path forward would be that they would be reaching out to the stakeholders that would be impacted most by the irrigation demands and bring them to the table for the Population and Water Demands Work Group meeting, so that they would really do the outreach to bring them in. Does that, and we're open to other paths forward, obviously, but that was just one proposal that I dropped. And do you have any thoughts or ideas or questions or feedback on that? Thanks. Jamie, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I guess if there aren't any other questions on irrigation, we can move on to mining. So again, these are the draft mining water demand projections. Again, this information is from the Water Development Board's dashboard, and you can get to it through that link that we provided, or that QR code earlier in the presentation. So again, we've got the red line that represents the 2021 plan projections. The green line is the draft 2026 plan projections, and then the black line over to the left is the historical data. The Water Development Board developed these projections through a mining water use study that was done by in coordination with the U.S. Geological Survey and the University of Texas Bureau of Economic Geology. And so the draft projections came directly from that report. That report is also available on the TWDB's website in that same location as through that link. So if you're interested and want to look at the report, you can get to it that way. In addition, the Bob Reedy from the BEG did a presentation on the mining water use study. That there's a link to that presentation as well. I believe it's a recorded presentation, so not just slides, so that if you're interested in learning the details about how all of the numbers were developed, you can look at that. And if you need help finding that link, you can shoot me an email and I can help you find that. But so in developing the mining demand projections, there's 3 components that were looked at. There's the oil and gas, the aggregate, and the coal. And so up at the top of this slide, those components are broken out for the 2030 and 2080 demands. And so you can see for oil and gas, in 2030, the demand is around 43,000 acre feet per year. And by 2080, it drops down to almost 0. You can see that that is reflected in that green line where it's increasing through 2070, and then it drops off for 2080. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that happens. But aggregate mining increases throughout the planning horizon. It starts at 31,000 acre feet per year in 2030, increasing up to 49,000 acre feet per year in 2080. And then in Region L, we really have 0 demand as far as coal mining. There's no water demand for coal mining in Region L. And I'll talk a little bit about, I have another slide on that. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Are there any questions? I guess, let me go ahead and explain the oil and gas. So the oil and gas, the water use is for drilling the wells. And so once the well is drilled, there's no more associated water use. And so what the BEG has done is they've looked at kind of the time span of when all of these wells will be drilled in the different plays around the state, and have determined that by 2060, 2070, really all of the drills that are, most of the wells are going to be already drilled. And so at that point, the water use is going to drop off. And so that's why that happens.
Still have a question?
Well, maybe. So in irrigation, the methodology was we look at the previous 5 years average and we project that into the indefinite future. So my original question was going to be, did we do the same thing with mining, or did they use some completely different methodology to figure out what mining usage would be?
I would say it's really very different. Because when I was looking at, in a lot of cases, if you look at the historical data for a county, it has no correlation with what the projections are for the future for that county. The study that was done was a very intense study, very detailed, much more detailed than just taking an average of the 5 years. So they're very different methodologies, I would say.
Okay.
Okay, so then I guess we can get into the numbers. We've got the numbers for you by county, again in 2 slides. And you can see how in some cases, for example, as I look at Gonzales County, it's increasing slightly through 2070 and then it drops off. And so that is probably a lot associated with the oil and gas versus, there may be some aggregate as well, but it's more of the oil and gas impact in that particular county. One like Comal County, where you can see it's increasing throughout the planning horizon from 2030 to 2080, that's probably more aggregate focused. So this is the second slide. Yes.
You said water is used for only drilling wells, so it doesn't consider fracking, right? Fracking water. So that's why you see decline. You're going to at some point stop drilling oil wells, it's presumed, but it's still going to be producing oil. And then fracking, maybe use fracking water. So for this analysis, what we have in front of us does not include fracking water, correct?
No, that should be, that's a good question. Maybe I don't understand quite the fracking process. I thought the water was used to open up those basically deposits to get to the oil and gas.
So is the question basically, is fracking included in the oil and gas?
Yes.
For the mine projections?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Jamie, do you know that answer, or is that something we'll need to look at?
It's included.
Okay, so
yeah.
It's included under the oil and gas. Right now, we don't have a population water demands work group scheduled to discuss mining. If that's something that you would like to do, or the planning group would like to do, we can certainly do that if so directed. Jamie, go ahead.
So, thanks. So this is a figure from the BEG report. It shows the Eagle Ford play and the completed unconventional oil and gas wells within it. And so these are the wells that have already been drilled. And so you can kind of have an idea where they're a little bit more sparse. Those are areas that may, those are counties that may see more development, more water use for the future projections. The ones that are pretty filled up may have a smaller amount of water use because many of the drills have already, many of the wells have already been drilled. Okay. And so this is also a figure from the BEG report. This is related to coal mining in Texas. The figure shows active coal mines in red. There, you can see there's only a few really. There is the San Miguel down at the bottom. The San Miguel mine is in Atascosa County in Region L. So we did reach out to the Water Development Board because the draft projections showed no water demand associated with coal in Region L. So we wanted to know if that was correct or not. And so through the BEG study, the BEG determined that the San Miguel mine does produce about 2,000 acre-feet per year of saline groundwater that is re-injected into the subsurface, and that the associated power plant with the mine is likely to retire in 2032. And so based on that information, there's no demand associated with that particular coal mine for water. Okay, and then I think I have one last slide. Yeah, and
James, there's a question.
Sorry. Okay.
The water usage currently by the San Miguel power plant for cooling purposes, is that included in the steam electric generation? Because that is a very sizable amount of water.
That's a good question. It should be, although again, perhaps if they anticipate it retiring around 2032, they may not have included it, but we can check on that.
I think that's, yeah, we need to investigate that problem.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Were there any other questions?
Okay, and then so this final figure is also from the BEG report, and it's just showing you areas of aggregate mining in 2019, and the darker blues are the higher water use, and you can see that in general the higher aggregate mining tends to be around the larger population areas because the aggregate is generally used for construction, and so it tends to be closer to where the construction is happening. So just we have several counties in Region L that have, you know, fairly high aggregate mining water use.
Are there any other questions about mining? So just to recap, we have scheduled population water demand work group meetings to discuss livestock, manufacturing, steam electric, and irrigation in more detail. We have the dates listed on this slide, and we'll be contacting those who have indicated interest or those who are listed as a member of the population water demands work group about the additional details about these upcoming meetings.
Would you also investigate the TWDB whether or not, and confirm that fracking water and refracking water is included in the mining?
Yes, sir, we can do that. Okay, any other questions?
This is Diane Wasenick. I have one small question dating back to the slide that she just showed on livestock. And did I understand that the livestock water demand is curtailed by the MAG that comes out from each county? And does that mean that no further water is needed beyond what the MAG provides? Or what does that mean, that it's been lowered by the MAG?
That was for irrigation.
Okay, yes. So that's associated with irrigation, water use, and so and I don't have a good slide to show it, but it does not mean that they're curtailed per se. The demand still may be higher than the MAG, but if it is, and the MAG begins to decrease over time, like for I think this happens maybe out in West Texas quite a bit. They're trying to help with the DFC by decreasing the MAG over time. And so the demand for irrigation will parallel that line. So it will, after 2030, it will begin decreasing as well. But it won't go below what the MAG is. It will just decrease in parallel with the MAG. Does that answer your question?
I'll save further questions for the individual committee meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Are there any other questions? If not, that concludes our presentation. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or would like additional information covered. So, thank you, guys.
Thank you. That'll conclude agenda item 7. Move to agenda item 8. Discussion action regarding establishment of additional subcommittees. I know of no interest, other than perhaps the drought matter. I know of no other interest to establish additional subcommittees. Is there anyone at this time that would like to indicate or suggest additional subcommittees? Okay. Let's move to agenda item 9, schedule for the 2023 regional planning meetings. Okay, so on the screen there we have proposed meeting dates. Those follow the normal pattern, first Thursday of those months. Okay. Are you want us to take some action to establish those, or?
Just if this pattern of the quarterly meetings is still working for y'all, this is what we've been doing for at least the past few years. If there are any major conflicts or desire to deviate from this schedule, this would be a good time to let us know. Otherwise, these are the proposed dates for 2023. And all of these dates have been graciously offered to host by SAWS.
Excuse me. Okay, very fine. Well, we'll proceed with those meeting dates, and of course, as the need arises for additional meetings, to change those meeting dates, we can act on that at a later date. Any discussion regarding that matter? Okay. Move to agenda item 10. Is there any discussion or comments regarding the schedule or agenda for the next meeting? Already talked about at least one presentation. If you think of any items that you would like to see scheduled for that agenda, please contact me or Kendall to discuss that. Yes.
At the last planning group meeting, there was expressed interest in receiving a briefing or presentation regarding the regional flood planning process. There are 3 regional flood planning groups within Region L. So I wanted to specify what the presentation would be. We would be able to have maybe a representative from TWDB provide an overview about the flood planning process, or if you guys wanted more specific information on the regions within Region L. That would be something that I would have to coordinate with their representatives or technical consultants. So I wanted to see what the interest was specifically.
Well, I think the discussion revolved around this, and certainly I do have an interest in how those plans may intersect the work that we're specifically to our region, the process, et cetera. There may be interest in that as well, but I'm not certain that there is overlap in any significant way that would alter what we're doing here or impact what we're doing, but I'd like at least to have the opportunity to consider that.
I mean, speaking to that, I'm part of the Region 13 flood planning, that's the Oasis flood planning group, and there is a section where we do about water storage and flood storage.
Okay.
So if that's of interest, we can discuss that.
Okay.
I'm certainly interested in, pardon my ignorance, I just have not kept track of what the scope of the work is of those groups, but I've been interested in knowing, are they focused on using this stormwater as a resource? And so I'd love to hear about that.
Very good.
Then I think TWDB might be the best representative that might have knowledge of both flood planning, water planning, be able to speak more to the overlap and how water planning has been integrated into the flood planning process, if that's acceptable.
I believe it would be. Let's proceed that way, Mr. Houston.
Yeah, I'm a voting member of the Guadalupe Region 11. I keep getting Region 10 planning group and Region 11 flood. And I'm also their liaison with Region 10, which is the Lower Colorado Lavaca River flood planning group. So we've all got our draft plans submitted to the Water Development Board. So this process is well on its way. We're on a real short fuse. And so I think if you have a program like this at a meeting, it might be surprisingly long. If you're going to deal with 3 flood planning committees and try and find out what their plans are and how it interacts with yours, it might be worth checking out to see what sort of intensity or length of meeting might be needed to compare to see if you're trying to find either overlap or conflicts or, improvements to the regional plan. It's just something to think about, but those are available at the Water Development Board. I'm sure they're all, I don't know about the other ones, but they're posted and available for review. So just my 2 cents.
Sure, we appreciate that. We'll be mindful of that. We just need to make it appropriate in scope and length, etc. But I think it would be appropriate to undertake that discussion, at least at the start, to see where it takes us. Okay. Any other discussion regarding future agenda items for future meetings? There being none, move to agenda item 11, public comment. Is anyone registered? Is there anyone online or in person wanting to make public comment at this time? Okay. Well, that concludes the meeting. We'll stand adjourned until our next meeting.
I need a motion.
Move.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those opposed, motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tim.